In this WrestleTalk news, the mystery at WWE house shows over the weekend, Bray Wyatt returning maybe, and a top star confirms they're done with AEW. Subscribe and enable notifications to always on for daily wrestling news videos.
Support WrestleTalk!
Until AEW's entire main event scene gets released for that backstage brawl, the biggest possible free agent signing in the whole industry right now is one Wyndham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt. It's been over a year since he was shockingly released by WWE last July, and with Triple H now in control of his former contractor, it's heavily speculated that Wyatt will be making his eagerly anticipated wrestling return imminently. Which is why, when anything even remotely spooky happens, wrestling Twitter in unison posts, Bray Wyatt return confirmed. Like 3 weeks ago on Raw, when a few people spotted a dude's arm poking through a door, which sparked several days of fantasy booking speculation. That we're putting so much emphasis on tiny background details is actually a huge credit to the Triple H regime so far. He's quickly established that things matter again, peppering his shows with Easter eggs and subtly foreshadowing teases. I recognize that a crashed car may not be subtle in most TV programs, but it is in wrestling, which is why the last 3 days of WWE live events has been so intriguing. Starting on Friday night, in the commercial break of SmackDown, WWE played the Jefferson Airplane song, White Rabbit. It's not just a great song, inspired by Alice in Wonderland, it's also become cinematic shorthand for mysterious psychedelic journeys of self-exploration. Played in the LSD scene in Platoon, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and in the recent Matrix reboot. It's important to note that it was an a cappella recording of the song too, not the original version, Glee style, implying this was an intentional effort and not just a sound engineer accidentally hooking up his Spotify account to the venue speaker system. At the same time, red lights started flashing from the entrance ramp. This was just for the live crowd only, and none of it was broadcast on TV. Then, the next night at a house show in Bakersfield, the exact same thing happened. This time, people lent into the spooky, potentially Bray Wyatt-y vibe and shone the torches from their phones, reminiscent of the old Wyatt family Firefly entrance. And again at another live event last night at the Oakland Arena. But maybe everyone is following the wrong rabbit. Karrion Kross, who also recently returned to WWE, was known as the White Rabbit when he wrestled in Lucha Underground. One fan tweeted Kross about that, suggesting it could be him behind these house show teases, which Kross himself replied with hole emoji, rabbit emoji, red question mark emoji, egg timer emoji. You want me to do what with the hamster? But then the plot thickened / became even more confusing. Reacting to another post thanking him for killing the Bray Wyatt WWE return rumors, Kross tweeted, "Call me a killer, guilty as charged. However, I wouldn't look to me as a suspect for any of this. I'm an innocent killer. People are reaching for answers and have no idea what to grasp for. Keep watching and have fun. That's what I'm doing. Egg timer emoji." Want me to do what with the egg timer? Meanwhile, Carl A. Scarborough, the artist and designer who heavily collaborated with Wyatt developing his Fiend gimmick, has tweeted, "Feed your head," which is the climactic line of the White Rabbit song, along with a hideous sketch, signed by Scarborough, of a man wearing a gruesome White Rabbit mask, a black cloak, blooded hand, a missing arm. This could potentially be a graphic design for a new Bray Wyatt gimmick on his WWE return. Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss took inspiration from Alice in Wonderland during their run together, even doing a version of the Mad Hatter's Tea Party at one point. And Rambling Rabbit was one of the main characters in Bray's Firefly Funhouse roster of puppets. He was usually murdered by the end of every episode, perhaps similar to the recent horror reboot of Winnie the Pooh. In the years since, Rambling Rabbit could have murdered all the other puppets in revenge, becoming the dominant force in Wyatt's head, more vengeful and eviler than even the Fiend. Wrestling! Or it's just Carl trolling us all, as it's unlikely the artist would spoil Wyatt's big WWE return gimmick with a post on Twitter. It's important to note that, timing-wise, these teases started the exact same day the Wrestling Observer newsletter reported that talks between Wyatt and WWE had stalled. Again, that either debunks the return theory or strengthens it, if you just believe it's a tactic to throw us all off the rabbit's trail. What do you think the White Rabbit teasers are all about? Let me know in the comments. And also go check out our 3-part The Fiend Explained video essay series over on Parts for No, which dives deep into Wyatt's fascinating lore lore of the character and might provide you with some clues of what he'll do next. Links in the video description below. Hopefully Wyatt does return to WWE, not just because he's one of the most creative minds in the business, but also because wrestling just got a little less spooky. Following their defeat at All Out earlier this month, Malakai Black seemingly broke character and embraced his fellow House of Black members and then waved his hands to the crowd. Not the most consistent thing for an Aleister Crowley-inspired goth to do. This came just several days after PW Insider reported Malakai had requested his release from AEW. Fightful later added that many in AEW now believed Black to be done with the promotion. At Saturday's Prestige Wrestling indie show, where he fought Kid Bandit, Black cut a promo.
Please allow me to take a few weeks, maybe a few months, to just recalibrate myself. Get everything in perspective. I promise you, this is not goodbye. This is just we'll see each other soon.
Now Malakai himself has confirmed the reports, posting a statement on Instagram. Firstly, thank you all for your messages. Know they are being read and appreciated. With all the turmoil going on in the landscape of professional wrestling, I took the time to think of my words, but also needed to wait until conversations between mine and AEW's camp had come to a conclusion. Firstly, dislike reading parts of my private conversations between myself and AEW in regards to my mental well-being on the internet. These conversations were private and not meant to be shared with the public, as by now most people realize I'm a very private person and do not feel the need to have stuff like this out on the internet. If you've been following me longer than a cup of coffee, you're aware I've spoken about them prior, but would like to be the one deciding when this finds its way to the public and not through someone else's mouth. As with anything through the lips of someone else, that story gets distorted. This is presumably in reference to the PW Insider report that first mentioned that Black was struggling with his mental health. It implies he was unhappy with how that information made its way to the press, and thus unhappy with AEW. He continues, I did indeed ask for my release. The last 2 years of my life have lended to a lot of setbacks. Both me and my wife have been affected by uncontrollable actions from the outside that resulted in loss of life, medical setbacks, career jeopardizing, the suicide of a close friend and a close family member also losing their life, then experiencing an injury that I was sure was the end of my career. I spend every week going through several sessions of rehab, dry needling and therapy just to be able to walk and compete. Now this being the tip of the iceberg, and with the combination of the promises in my professional field that were not upheld, which resulted as a combination of all these to a complete demoralization of life and career. This decision had been in my mind for the past 6 months. It's unclear whether these career promises not being met were about his time in WWE or AEW. He was plagued with creative frustrations on the main WWE roster, but after an initially very hot start in AEW, his House of Black soon became stuck in what felt like the same Rampage feud for 8 months. Some of this is presumably down to Black's injuries, but it's disheartening to see someone who could conceivably be placed as a World Championship contender shortly after joining end up fighting for AEW's equivalent of the European title just a few months ago. Black finished reiterating his Prestige promo about taking a few months to recalibrate, hopefully implying he won't be out of wrestling for long, and again mentioning his unhappiness about certain details being made public, specifically in regards to his mental health, saying if it didn't come from me, it didn't happen, and denying he used that as leverage to get himself a conditional release. With him leaving AEW seemingly unhappy with how they conducted themselves regarding their private talks, it makes his return far more competitive, especially with his former NXT boss Triple H now running the main roster. Before his release, Black was under a 5-year deal with AEW. But what will his next wrestling gimmick be? We've got an explained video essay about the history of Aleister Black's character too. Watch it all over on Parts Unknown with our Bray Wyatt series.
Long yellow hair, pallid white skin, and glaring yellow eyes. The alligator-slaying swamp creature that Bray Wyatt described back in 2015 seemingly sets up the character he would become in 2019. A beast of unimaginable strength with a maddening